All right, good morning. Let's talk about programming. We'll try and keep this short and sweet, to the point, very honest. My hope is that you haven't seen anything like this before. These lessons and principles I've landed on here because I have been experimenting for the last 10 years with this stuff, all the way from no plan at all to planning every single rep, every single practice, right down to the minute, and weeks and months ahead of time. Ultimately, it's led me to have some lessons that I think make for successful programming, and take some of the stress out of the worry of not knowing what you're going to do or having a direction with your training. The thing is that worrying isn't necessary, but a plan is necessary. And through conversation in the group, I get the sense that there isn't many people with direction. So I want to help provide a resource, more than one, in fact, for people who are looking for a little bit of direction, a little bit of structure, some advice on how to wrap their head around their entire practice, and keep track of what they're doing. So, number one, remember this is three key principles. Number one is a singular or dual orientation. In 10 years, I have found that if I'm working on more than two things, priority, and remember, priority is a singular word. People in the English language have turned it into a plural, which it is not. 1 to 2 priorities. Tier 1 and Tier 2. Tier 1 deserves and is the main objective in your training. So your 90-day goal, and I'm not talking about timelines here, you won't see any time, but for example, a 90-day goal, you set that Tier 1, and then you set a sub Tier 2. The Tier 2 is like related to the Tier 1, but it should come first. It should be your reminder and your objective, if you will, to ensure that you are on track to reach the Tier 1 goal. So the orientation is the end objective, the direction of your training, and it dictates what your feedback mechanism does. So the feedback mechanism is it's the questions you ask yourself in your training. Your training time is spent doing something, and at the end of the week you have XYZ outcome or result, and your job is to measure those results against your feedback mechanism, which originally comes from your orientation, and answer the question, is this moving me towards my goals or away from my goals? The thing is that if you don't have an orientation, then you kind of end up doing this, going around and 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 around, and you never really break off the path and move towards anything. It's not to say that you don't improve your physical fitness, you don't get more flexible, you don't stand on your hands longer, you don't, explore, discover something new. It's that you may have done all those things, but none of them are to your best ability. None of them are exercising your full, focused ability to develop something at an elite level. To really exercise your full potential. And I think it perhaps takes some experimentation in that loop for a little while to finally decide that, well, I want an orientation now. I've seen what the loop is like, and now I'm going to try something that is more specific. So just keep all of that in mind. Maybe ask yourself, are you in the loop right now? Do you have an orientation? Do you want one? Is it worth sitting down and setting that? Number 2 is complete progression. Okay, this is the meat and potatoes of programming. I talked about the principles of programming being tried and true, and being able to use those rules, a few of them anyway, depending on the situation you're in. We're not Olympic lifting, so relevant to the skill we're practicing, using principles of programming that matter, however, keeping those in mind, being willing to experiment with other things along the way. So, exercising some creativity, but being grounded in your orientation and some of the principles you know to be true from your study, from your work with a coach, etc. So, what do those mean? Your goals must be measurable. Results must be measurable. If you cannot measure, you cannot make it. So, set up your training in a way that can be measurable. Those can be success, failure, they can be time, they can be weight, they can be, pounds, they can be positions, they can be entries and exits, they can be skill proficiency. But depending on the result and what you're tracking, they need to be measurable, and you need to come up with a way to measure them. 2, increasing difficulty. And this actually is closely related to number 3. So increasing difficulty and rest are interrelated. You have a rest period, you set up training to then climb, increasing in difficulty until you meet another rest period. So the two are combined, in a sense, to allow for each to happen correctly. So this is periodization of training. This is one of those principles that is tried and true, and you cannot forget when training hand balance, when training flexibility, when training bodyweight skills, when Olympic lifting, when, doing anything that you want to exercise towards your potential. Rest and increasing difficulty. It should move from a period of rest steadily in a 4 to 8, at the most, 8-week window. Truly, I'm going to rephrase that because that's bullshit. 4 to 6 weeks, really. I have not seen any success at 8 weeks. The only people I can think of, and myself included, that have gotten to 8 weeks without taking a planned period of rest, it's purely through discipline. It's purely through just grind it out through the pain. And that was an old version of me, guys. 4 to 6 weeks at the maximum before you take a planned rest period. And trust me, if you don't plan that rest period, it won't fucking happen. So plan it, put it in your book, put it in your calendar, make it happen, plan your training to increase up to that point, and track what you're doing, measure it, because after that rest period, you continue to climb. Third and final point, an anchor. When you're navigating those 4 to 6 weeks, shit is not going to be easy. Nothing is going to be fun all the time. You need to have reminders, the reasons you're doing things. And this is where I encourage people to get selfish, okay? Don't do things to post them on Instagram. Don't do things to impress your brothers and sisters or get more training clients. Do things because you want to do them. And it often means that you have to reset everything. It means you need to stop consuming so much and actually begin looking internally for what it is you want out of this practice. What it is you want. And you might realize that you're not even sure. And if that's the case, you have some reflection to do. You have some work to do to sort out what you want. What is that selfish desire? It needs to be anchored in enjoyment for what you're doing. Even when it gets hard, you need to be able to remind yourself that you chose to be here, that this is something you enjoy. It may not be easy today, but the future holds enjoyment because you can use these things. They're durable skills. You've built them from ground zero, from nothing. And the selfishness just means, get after it for your goals, not for someone else's goals. So that is the breakdown. Hopefully sub 10 minutes. But anyways, hope everybody enjoys it. Let me know if you have any questions, comments, send me your thoughts, drop them in the comments, whatever. Peace.